Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, or regulatory landscape and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining us this afternoon, we have Lauren Winchester, Head of Cyber Risk Services at Travelers, Jennifer Wilson, Cyber Practice Leader at Newfront, and Barnaby Page, Vice President of Global Incident Response and Insurance at SentinelOne. We're here to discuss practical steps companies can take to reduce cyber risk and boost employee awareness. It is great to have all of you with us to discuss one of my favorite topics that we cover. Barnaby, I'm going to kick it off with you and Jennifer, and we can have everyone follow up, Lauren, you as well. But Barnaby, how do you see the cyber environment evolving as the, attack surface and vulnerabilities just to, increase astronomically every day, it feels like?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think the things that jump out at me in the past 6 months are the supply chain attacks. So, like Move It, Change Healthcare, where you have one attack that leads to thousands of victims, right? Second, I would say the AI, has just you call it the cyber threat inflation, where it's so cheap for the threat actors to now go out and do phishing campaigns, ransomware as a service, et cetera. And the attack surface is so large that we're seeing that with our clients, and I work on incident response, so we see it in a lot of the cases as well. Those things are very important because AI, everything is happening at machine speed. And so your defenders, your clients out there, they need to be able to defend at machine speed. And I think that's one of the things that clients are coming to realize, is that they don't even really have time to react and send alerts up to a SOC and then have an answer come back down.
Yeah, and Lauren, in terms of how you're seeing the space evolve as well, like the bad actors and the good actors are both leveraging the same type of emerging technology. So it's kind of a game of 4D chess at all times.
It really is. And, one of the things that we look closely at every quarter is how many victim companies are appearing on ransomware threat actor leak sites on the dark web, because that gives us a good indication of the level of activity that's going on, because ransomware is one of those attacks that we see frequently in our claims. And what we've noticed is that in the Q1 victims listed on the leak site, there's a notable increase over Q4. And so I think, to what Barnaby was saying, we can attribute a portion of that certainly to the automation that they're able to achieve, the higher level of use of AI and ability to do deep fakes and whatnot. It's definitely making it easier for threat actors to carry out these attacks.
Yeah. And Jennifer, it's interesting, as well that biometrics is becoming a challenge, which I find interesting because now you're also looking at the privacy regulatory climate as well. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jill. And to follow up on what Barnaby was saying, we're seeing a significant increase in wrongful collection types of claims where organizations are getting hit with privacy claims from plaintiff counsel with respect to pixel tracking, so tracking users on the website, or the collection and storage of biometrics, as you said, Jill. So it's the retina scans, face scans, fingerprints, et cetera. It's the collecting, storing, and using and potential transfer of biometrics without proper consent. So we're seeing a lot of that. And then just to highlight what Lauren was saying, and to your point earlier, Jill, is the use of AI is happening at rapid speed, and AI is being leveraged to give the unskilled hackers the capability of pulling off sophisticated attacks. And while AI is moving at a rapid pace, the insurance industry unfortunately moves at a glacial pace. So we're just trying to keep up with the threat actors.
So how does this impact insurance coverage? Because as I understand it, this is different than commercial insurance. Cyber insurance is something completely separate when you need to access that. Should there be an incident, how is this impacting claims in terms of how they're increasing, and then how insurance companies are looking at this settlement exposure that companies are open to?
Yeah, as I said, like the AI and cyber claims are moving at such rapid speed, but unfortunately, insurance companies for the most part, don't offer affirmative AI coverage. Some are starting to throw it in there here and there, but for the most part, we're stuck relying on silent AI for coverage. We are working with a lot of insurers to kind of catch up on the exposures and negotiate language within the policies to offer affirmative coverage, but we're not quite there yet, still trying to keep up with it.
But it's also important to note, I think, that the use of AI by threat actors to make what they're doing faster or more efficient doesn't necessarily change the attack and how it's happening and how it, might ultimately lead to a ransomware attack or a business email compromise or the types of claims that we've seen before. So while there's definitely considerations in there, like Jennifer's saying, to how cyber can evolve, you still see a lot of the same tried and true types of attacks that would typically fall under your cyber insurance.
Yeah, Lauren.
For the most part, sorry, Barnaby.
No, I was just going to say, like, to what Lauren was saying, like, if they use AI to craft a phishing email and then that leads to a social engineering claim, that claim is still going to be honored, right, by the carrier.
Yeah, what I would say is that there are some gaps in the coverage. So I agree with what Lauren just said. If AI is part of your technology and part of your business operations, that type of claim is going to be covered. However, there are some types of claims that haven't been contemplated yet that fall within this gap. I'll give you a quick example: is bias. If a company is using, I've seen this up front. With one of our clients, they were using an AI tool to weed through candidate applications, and it was only putting forth white males for the job position. And so the HR person thought there might be an issue there, jumped in and had existing employees who were female or people of color apply for the jobs that they actually hold, and they were top performers in their roles, and they were rejected by the tool. So that would fall under what I would capture as bias. And bias kind of falls in this, that would be a failure to hire or failure to promote type of claim, and that would fall under employment practices liability. Right. My guess is the EPL policy has a tech E&O exclusion. The tech E&O policy has an employment related exclusion. So there are claims that fall in this gap where there is no coverage. Yeah.
Which is interesting. We did something last year, I believe it was, with the EEOC. And one of the questions that we posed is, because AI is not in the framework yet, how do companies, go about, what does their operating environment look like when it comes to employment law? And they mentioned something similar. The framework exists as it is now, but that doesn't mean you can't comply. It doesn't mean you can't blame the AI tool. You still have to remain in compliance and governance, consent. None of that changes, even though the framework is in development. So I want to get into, Lauren, I want to think about practical steps that organizations can take to reduce cyber risk, boost employee awareness, because this has evolved into something that the culture from the top down needs to think about, a cyber first mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key areas that all companies need to be focused on is how they're evolving their cybersecurity awareness training with their employees. Employees are either going to be that first, bell ringing out about a potential issue, or they're going to be causing it, right? And so making sure that employees have the training available to them that's incorporating these new threats is super key, and that the trainings are interactive. I see some of the best companies, you can even do a pretty inexpensive training, right? Where you take examples from what you're experiencing and show your employees that, because it brings it home and makes it real for them. So great employee training is going to be key. And then back to the fundamentals of cybersecurity best practices. That's still, having multi-factor authentication on your remote access and your email and your admin credentials, still super important. And then really key is, how do you get that early detection? Assume there's going to be some sort of break-in to your company. What's going to clue you in as a security team that's happened. And that's really where I think Barnaby comes into play there with that early detection.
Barnaby, I also think it is not a set it and forget it policy. It's almost like fire drills. It has to be a constant exercise because as the environments evolve, so does the mitigation and response, right? So I think not just checking the boxes is a big part of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the insurers, I've been kind of a student of insurance for the past decade from the breach perspective, right? When all things fail, you have a breach. And what I've seen is the insurance industry really get smart about what Lauren just said. You know, we got to have MFA, we have to have immutable backups, we have to have phishing training. And taken together, they then underwrite against all of these controls, and they enforce hygiene. And so I think DHS, you know, the past few years has really been using cyber insurance to try and up-level everybody to getting their environments workable. And the other thing that I've seen, you know, we work with the insurers, and I was at the Coalition Activate event up in New York last month, and they talked about, you know, Josh Mata was talking about their use of attack surface management. So for every Nasdaq company has a knowledge graph that they've already built, and they got an application in, and they looked at the application and they said, you know, we see a Citrix server here that doesn't have MFA turned on. And they literally showed the chart that they sent back to the applicant. And the applicant was Change Healthcare. And 2 weeks later, that Citrix server got popped. You know, $2.6 billion, you know, breach, $9 billion that UNH had to loan to the healthcare system to keep us operational, right? So the use of attack surface management by the insurance carriers, amazing, right? Because they're constantly seeing this. And we're doing, you know, inside or out sharing now, where our clients can share data from the inside out. So to your point, the insurers are looking from the outside in. We're helping our clients to share inside out telemetry so that they can give a real, you know, this percentage of my network has EDR and et cetera. And these are the vulnerabilities, et cetera. And that sort of constant monitoring by the insurer and through sharing with the clients is going to enable them to properly price the risk. They're going to get a better risk profile, and then they're going to be able to price it.
Speaking of pricing, Jennifer, when companies apply for cybersecurity insurance, is there an industry model or fundamental metrics that you can apply in terms of coverage and what it's going to cost and so forth? Because reputational costs can sometimes be arbitrary. Fixed costs, you know, the environment continues to evolve. What is that model like?
I was going to just talk about what Barnaby was bringing up, is the fact that, you know, insurers and brokers are using these tools to help clients understand what their vulnerabilities are. They use an external risk scan. We're using an external risk scan to help our clients understand if they have any software vulnerabilities that they should address up front. But on the flip side, you know, who else is using those tools is the threat actors. So they're using them to find out, to identify vulnerabilities of their potential targets. But then there's also tracking scans that plaintiff attorneys are using to identify their targets for their privacy, non-compliance, privacy litigation as well. So everyone's using these scans for their own benefit. Yeah, so it's interesting that
So it just lends to the complexity of the environment in general. You know, never mind the models trying to figure out what coverages, what premiums are. Lauren, taking a step back here for a moment, just so that we can understand what happens during an incident. An incident is it's recognized. I'm sure things happen really quick. So is there a checklist? Is your incident response plan? How important is the incident response plan? Let's just start there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to see companies that are policyholders that had incident response plans in place, and it really did help them jump on that incident faster. And I've seen the flip side of it where folks hadn't done the planning, and it shows. When you've got an incident response plan in place, and when the incident response goes well, what it looks like is you have early identification of something that could be a data breach, right? Could potentially be one. You don't know yet. You think you might have some anomalous activity in your systems, what have you. So you're going to start to trigger that incident response plan and bring in the internal folks on your incident response team, whether that's from security, IT, you might have leadership or finance, legal. It's just going to depend on the size of your organization and who those core members are to help you work through the problem. And then once you've identified, we think there's something here, we need help, that's the trigger to say, okay, let's notify our cyber insurance carrier. Let's make sure that we're able to work this through a claim. And then the claim professionals are going to get right on the phone with that company to say, okay, let's get a law firm engaged. Let's get a forensics firm engaged. We can start to help you contain the situation and ultimately kick the bad guys out and determine what they did once they were in your network. And so the faster that a company can get from something might be happening to in the hands of experts who do this all the time and can help, the better their outcomes are going to be from a response perspective.
Right. You know,
I would say
I'm sorry, Jennifer.
I would say to test that before you have an incident as well. We've seen a lot of clients who have a great plan in place, but nobody really knew whose role was what. So test it and know your insurance policy in advance. Most policies require the use of panel counsel. Have a call with that panel firm in advance. Let them get to know your business up front. Run the conflict check in advance so that when there is an event, everybody is hitting the ground running and not wasting time getting to know the organization and their business operations.
And Barnaby, that goes back to what you and I were discussing before, that this isn't just checking the boxes. It has to be consistent practice and evolve as the environment is evolving. I would even argue that cyber isn't something that's nice to have, or it's something you can react to. I think it's a core part of certainly the risk model, but I would say the business model for the enterprise in general. I would even think it's a good marketing and selling point, right? If you are, if you are a client of that company, I would certainly consider that.
Well, certainly for third party, risk, a lot of our clients, they have to have a good tech stack in place. They have to have cyber insurance in place before they can say, get a contract with Northrop Grumman, right? Because they need to know you have these protections. We put our software out with global IR firms. We did over 5,000 breaches last year with partners. So we've seen everything. And everything that's been said here today is accurate. I mean, you really need to have a plan and then work that plan. It can't be the first time, can't be when you have a breach, because I can tell you everything goes out the window and it's a mess. But I will say one more positive thing that insurance has done. Since we did all the big breaches back in 2012, 14, 15, TJX, all of them. But what's happened in the past couple of years is it's changed. And because everyone has been listening to the insurers, they've been putting MFA in place, EDR, the breaches are different now. The attacks aren't as bad. And I think it's working. I think getting the right software into the tech stack, listening and working with your insurer, following best practice is going to mean we're going to have fewer attacks. And when we have the attack, we're going to be able to contain them. Like when we get into a breach, it'll be like, let's say they have that are impacted, right? We push it out to all 5,000, we freeze the environment, and then those 35 or 70 machines that are really ransomed, we solve them, and then but we protect the rest of the environment, so that nothing spreads. So I would say that over the past couple of years, things have gotten a lot better because of what insurance is doing.
I'm glad you brought that up because we typically only hear the bad news, right? Or, because you have to report these things. So it's almost like you don't want to hear from the CISO or the cybersecurity professionals.
We're not responding to breaches directly. We support Booz Allen and Kroll and SRM, and so we see everything, but we're one step removed. So it's still hectic, but we see all manner of attack, all the ones you've seen in the press. We've seen it. We've been involved, or we've seen it, and so have the insurers, right? So the insurers have a lot at stake, and I like the way that they educate their clients. I like the way that they bring discount software from places like SentinelOne. And so I think the trend is good, but you brought up earlier some of the things that are making it harder, like AI, and companies, like 30% of the companies out there still have legacy software like Sophos and other. They just won't stop these threats, so you're still going to have attacks.
Well, and also crucially, Barnaby, it's not just about having the right tech stack; it's how it's implemented and enabled, right, as well. So I do agree with you that I think a lot of companies have invested in their cybersecurity and matured, and we're seeing some really good examples in our claims of those that catch it early, have the tech enabled correctly, and then we're mitigating the blast radius of that attack, and it becomes almost a non-event. But if they're not enabling and implementing that tech properly, that's where we see it fall down. They think they're protected, but they've really not turned it on to its fullest extent. And that's where, companies do have to do this testing and the tabletops and whatnot to make sure they're really in the right place.
Yeah. One of your colleague carriers put out a paper last month that said exactly that. They said of all the claims from last year, the majority were caused by misconfigurations, not vulnerabilities. So exactly.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you need to have the employee training and the authentication of, we're seeing a ton of wire fraud claims, and they're a result of employees, falling victim to phishing schemes, or just look at the deepfake, the $25 million wire fraud deepfake claim from last year. So I think it's a global approach. It's the cybersecurity, it's the implementation, it's the employee training, it's the insurance, it's the breach response plan. It's organizations have to look at cyber from a global perspective within the organization, rather than just, putting all the pressure on the CISOs.
Yeah, and that's great points that you all bring up, because it does have to be a culture cyber first from the top down. We appreciate all of your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.